Hello. Hello. Good afternoon to one and all. Good afternoon to one and all. Good afternoon. Hope everybody is safe and healthy during this pandemic. So good afternoon to one and all. Hope everybody is happy and healthy and safe and healthy. It's my great pleasure to be with you this afternoon. Hello.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, so this is Darpan Swati. Can you hear me? Hello.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
It's clear?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay, so we'll wait for 2 minutes and then we'll start. So, how many of you are listening to me? Means I don't know. I have not, what to say, unmuted all.
Sir, we can listen.
Okay, so can somebody take charge of taking attendance? Who will do that? maybe in between or towards the end of the lecture? No responses. No, the idea is it will save us time. Okay, so somebody is coming forward to take charge of attendance, then I can save few minutes of the lecture so that we can actually discuss about the relevant content.
Sir, we can just type P in chat box.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
then we can.
No. So after that chat needs to be saved, no? So somebody should, at the end of the lecture or towards the end of the lecture, somebody should do that. Because in the flow of lecture, I may forget that. Who is speaking now? Acha, so Swati Kamath, are you listening to me?
Yes, sir.
So can you please take attendance at the end of the lecture, towards maybe 5 minutes before the lecture ends? So you'll
Sir,
have
I'll
to,
just take a screenshot of the participants list.
that is okay, that's good. But at the same time, you save, put on WhatsApp group to enter P in the chat. Okay. And
Okay, sir.
towards end, you can save the chat and email to me.
Okay, sir, I'll do it.
Okay, so Swati is taking this responsibility. Thank you very much, Swati, for this. Because there are so many things I request all of you to cooperate with me, right? Because we are on virtual platform. Okay, anyways, I see only 18 participants. Only 18 students are there, or some few more are waiting? Acha, admit all. Okay.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm saying 80 times now. That's good. Dylan.
It was not connected before.
No. I actually did not admit all of you. Then I saw 19 people were waiting for my clicking of that particular button, admit all. Okay, now you can listen, no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So in all, I see around 40 participants. So people will keep on coming in. Huh? Well, that's fine. Message? What is that?
Sir, should I take the attendance during the end of this lecture or the next lecture? Because you have a double.
No. No. Actually, what will happen? Some of the students may or may not join next lecture, or those who have not joined this lecture, they may join in the next lecture. So it's better to take attendance in every lecture. Okay. So what we'll do?
Okay, sir. So I'll do it during both.
Yeah. You should do it during both lectures, and then we'll see if what do you say? Students are attending both lectures and everybody is sure about that. Then we can cut down it to one lecture. There is no
Okay,
difficulty.
sir.
Okay. So can somebody put in the WhatsApp group, not for today's lecture now, that at least 5 minutes.
Yes, I'm doing that.
No, attendance okay. What I'm saying is that now it's a different thing. What I'm observing is that now it's almost 3 minutes, 2 minutes past 3. Still, some students are joining. Okay, so can we have a protocol of joining just 1 or 2 minutes before the actual lecture? My video is not opening. Okay, so I request all of you to join the meeting before start of the meeting, because here it shows continuously that I have to admit all. Fine. Okay, so total number of participants or number of students who are attending this lecture are around 47. So shall we start with the lecture? Is that fine, or shall we wait for 1 or 2 minutes more?
You can start.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Well, so good afternoon to one and all. I hope all of you are safe and healthy during these trying times of pandemic. But still, because of technology, we are able to continue with our learning. That's good. I am thankful to this Zoom app team. Because of them, they have made this basic plan free, wherein we can talk for 40 minutes, and around 100 participants are allowed in this. So I'm thankful to their basic plan. I express my thankfulness once again to them. Well, it's my pleasure to be with you during this afternoon. I'm very excited actually to be with you during this lecture, and that too virtual. Okay, so we are interacting through a video conferencing call, and let's see how it goes. Now, before I start my formal lecture, there are some instructions which already I have told the class teacher to deliver to you. I hope everybody might have received these instructions. Still, for sake of repetition, I would like to repeat it here. Okay, so the first thing is that though we are not in direct touch, direct contact, still I would like all of you to maintain a separate notebook for this subject. And whenever we start solving the problems on this, you start actually solving as if you are sitting in the class. Okay, so then it will be more fruitful. Otherwise, you will forget so many things, and then there will be difficulty to connect the dots, you can say. Okay, so it's better to maintain a proper separate notebook as if you are sitting in a regular classroom. That is one expectation from all of you. Second thing is that please see how can you arrange for either soft copy or hard copy of the data book. It's better to have hard copy with you. If it is not possible, soft copy, if you are not able to get it, let me know. I will send it to one or two people so they can share it on the WhatsApp. Okay, so that is one thing. If you feel like to, you can join me on LinkedIn. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel. This video will, I will have to actually start recording of this. I have not, it is recording. Well,
So give link for your YouTube channel.
I will give in the second lecture. I have not just what is it? Or if
No
you
problem, sir.
even if you just what do you say? Google it on YouTube, my name, and you should be in a position to find it. Anyways, I will share it in the next lecture.
Few students are waiting for joining.
Yeah, that's what I just know I saw that.
Yeah, they contacted us.
No, I'm actually what is happening. That's what I'm what do you say? Expecting that everybody should join just before 3 o'clock because it's disturbing. I'll have to continuously look at the screen, who is waiting for joining and all those things. Well, so you should have calculator with you. Maybe may not be required for first one or two lectures, but then we will require calculator so that I would expect all of you should calculate the required dimensions whenever it is asked to do and interact, tell me the answers, we will cross verify. And as far as the problem solving is concerned, when we actually do some calculations, what I will do is that I will make use of Octave desktop. Okay, so you will be able to see actually the formulae being typed in that. Only difficulty with it is that the nomenclature will be slightly different. We'll have to just adjust with that. If we are compatible with that nomenclature, then I think it will be very good platform to 8 minutes. Yes, it will be a good platform to discuss with the problem solving actually, right? Well, so we will start about design. I already have studied one design subject in 6th semester. And what is design? Can anybody tell me what do you mean by design? Or shall I just go on telling the things and then we'll move ahead? Well, I will go ahead with that. So design is to create something which has not been there anytime before. Okay, so to create something new. And typically design enables and provides solution to the problems that have not been solved before, or it gives the new solution to the existing problem. That is typically design. Okay, and in case of design, we have design analysis as well as design synthesis. You are quite aware of these terms, but still, for sake of repetition and revision, I am repeating these things. For a few more minutes, I will be talking about initial part of the design from machine design 1. Okay. So when we want to solve the problem in design, generally we decompose the whole system into small, measurable or manageable chunks. And then because a system is involved of many different components, like in case of automobile, you see so many components are connected together, assembled together. We need to understand what is the how that particular part performs when in service. And in order to know how the part performs in the service, it is expected or we must be in a position to predict what is the performance of that individual component. And that too, we should be in a position to predict the performance of component before the component is physically manufactured. And how do we do that? So for this purpose, we'll make use of basic and engineering sciences and available computational tools. Like nowadays we have so many computational tools available with us, maybe Abacus or ANSYS. You can make use of this. SolidWorks also can be used to some extent to create drawings, and these drawings can be transported to the ANSYS or Abacus for further simulation purpose. So we need to be acquainted with some computational or simulation software. At the same time, I expect and I want all of you to develop computational thinking. Now, what I mean by computational thinking is that you should have, or you should start learning one of the programming languages, and preferably MATLAB, or the exact version of open source version of MATLAB is Octave, which is what I am going to make use of here for problem solving. So start learning Octave also. That will be good for you. These are the requirements nowadays. Okay. So representation of the real complex system with the help of a simplified model is actually part of analysis. Okay, so we make many assumptions. We represent the system, actual physical system, using some simplified version of that model, and then we analyze for our specified purpose, maybe or for a specified task, you can say. So that part is analysis. Now, if you look at synthesis, it involves identification of the basic elements of the given product, decomposing the product into many parts, and combination of the part solutions to come up with a total workable system. That is synthesis. Okay. If you look at design, there are 4 C's in relation to design. Number 1 is creativity. Then we have complexity, choice, and compromise. These are the 4 C's in relation to design. So what is creativity? Creativity is about creation. Creativity is about creating something new which has not been there before, or even it is not present in designer's mind also. That is creativity. About complexity, we need to make many decisions related to many variables or parameters. So there are many parameters which are contradictory to each other. So we need to have a proper optimization about best possible variables which will dictate what is the performance of that particular system. Then we need to third C is choice. So we need to look at or we need to choose the optimum solution between the solutions available at every stage of design. So that is third C. And last C is compromise. As I mentioned, there are many variables, and we need to compromise on multiple and sometimes contradictory requirements. So these are the 4 C's of design. Now, if you look at this subject of mechanical design or machine design, it is a prominent subject in course of mechanical engineering, because it runs across 3 semesters: machine design 2, and then design of mechanical systems in 8th semester. Okay, so it's one of the prominent subjects in the curriculum of mechanical engineering, and it consists of application of scientific principles, technical information, and imagination in the description of a product that is to be designed for performing a specific task, and that too with maximum economy and efficiency. Okay, so that is what is definition of mechanical engineering design, or mechanical design in short, you can say. And what are the requirements of a designer? Okay, so in order to perform this task, a designer needs to have the overall information about various basic and engineering sciences such as mathematics, physics, statics, dynamics, solid mechanics, fluid mechanics. You can even consider thermodynamics and heat transfer. So it is expected that a designer should be all-rounder as far as the various subjects are concerned. And then, but then it is very difficult to do that actually. It's very harsh on a single person to have a sufficient expertise in so many different subjects. But at the same time, we need to have a fair enough idea about overall concepts in all those subjects, and that is the requirement of this particular subject of machine design. And not only that, as I mentioned, we need to have a proper understanding of computational thinking. Okay, so these are the requirements. Now, when we want to design something, what is the final outcome of that design? A product or a certain configuration which will perform required tasks. Okay, so there is a step-by-step approach to perform these design tasks, and first step in that design task or procedure is to list specifications. What are the specifications which would be part of your product? That is what the first step which you are going to consider, and in that all these specific requirements will be on the basis of functional requirements. Now, what do you mean by functional requirements? Functional requirements dictate the why you are going to design the product. Okay, so for example, why we require cars? There is a person who wants to go to office from home. So functional requirement of a car is to transport people from their home to the offices. Okay, but then that is the functional requirement of a car. And nowadays, if you look at the design of car, it's highly sophisticated and state of the art. If you look at the list of products, what all the products we have at our disposal today, and I am talking about daily use products, not about which we have heard of. We are using it in some way or other. Okay, so the automobile or the car, the luxury car, or you can say state-of-the-art car, is the most sophisticated product ever which have been produced by humankind, or humans actually, you can say. Because it is, I am talking about products which are in daily use, not in space technology or something else like that. Okay, so but still, what was the functional requirement of car? Transportation. But now, if you look at the design of cars, first of all, will look at what is the body design of the car. That car should be attractive. When you are running on the road, it should be attention grabbing. That is the body design actually. Now, second requirement is comfort. The passengers should feel comfortable inside when they travel in the car. And third and very important upcoming requirement is that vehicle safety. Now, what do you mean by vehicle safety? The vehicle should take care of itself or occupants, or in case of an accident, the vehicle should be in a position to take care of the occupants of the colliding vehicle also. That is vehicle safety. Okay, so there are so many stringent rules are upcoming, and therefore automobile industry is actually giving very sophisticated products as such. Well, so that is functional requirement of car, and how we are changing the design parameters with the new requirements. Now, when you list all possible sophisticated parameters, then next step is to next step is to think about different possible mechanisms and draw rough sketches of these. Once you have different possible mechanisms, and then what you will do, you will compare all these mechanisms within themselves and also with the products that are available in the market. This analysis will reveal the competitiveness of that product. Also, as a designer, you should have proper idea about what are the raw materials required for that particular mechanism, and you should have proper idea about what are the standard components which are available in the market, which you can make use of. And at the same time, you need to look at whether that particular design is manufacturable in your industry, in-house. Okay, so depending upon the cost competitiveness, availability of raw materials and manufacturing processes, the best possible mechanism is selected. Now, next step after selection of the best possible mechanism is general layout of the overall system. And in that you will mention which components are connected to which other component and how they interact with each other. After coming up with the layout of that, we will actually come to the something called as analysis. Okay, individual analysis of the analysis of individual components. Okay, so wherein we will mention about what are the forces acting on individual component. We will select appropriate materials for that. We will decide upon what, the way it is going to fail, if at all it is going to fail, and we will talk about the failure criterion such as yield strength, ultimate tensile strength or ultimate strength, endurance strength, and also in some cases permissible deflection. Well, after that we will come up with geometric dimensions of all individual components, and then finally we prepare the drawings. Something called as, previous old days it was called as blueprint. Okay, so nowadays we prepare these drawings on the CAD software, so there is no need to actually go for blueprints as such. But then that is a common word utilized for that. Okay, so that is the full description of the product which you are going to design. And in some cases, you will prepare a model prototype, and that will be tested rigorously before you actually launch the product. Now, this is what you have studied in design 1. I'm not telling anything new in this. You already know about this. But the point I'm making here is that I want to connect this particular design procedure with current moment of startup and entrepreneurship. Okay, so today's startup is the buzzword in India, though pandemic has put some applied brakes on this ecosystem of startup, and it has adversely affected the startup ecosystem. But still, startup is a buzzword in India today, and maybe in near future, if situation improves, again it will take up. Okay, so if you look at startup and entrepreneurship, the thing is that there are 3 stages in that. First one is pre-incubation stage, then we have incubation stage, and then finally we have accelerator program. Okay, so the procedure what I just now explained in order to design a mechanical product is same as that of all the steps which we perform as a part of pre-incubation of any startup or any idea. So only difference is that at the first and the last. Okay, so if you look at, I discussed about coming up with the list of specifications for a given product. Okay, but in case of machine design problems, you will be given a proper well-defined statement of problem, and you will apply the principles what you are going to study in design subject, and then you will come up with the solution, and you will stop when you will come up with the proper description of individual components in that with the help of drawings. Okay, so that is what is machine design procedure. Okay, but if you just go before the list of specifications and before you go to the list of specifications, there if you are in a position to define your own problem, what problem you are going to solve. Okay, so that is the idea and thinking about that. And brainstorming about various possible solutions or ideas, and then you come up with your own problem statement which is relevant to the society, and you are going to solve that. Okay, and we will not end up with the drawings. Okay, so we will prepare, or we will come up with some prototype model of that particular product which you are thinking of. You will rigorously test it, and after that you can say it is a proof of concept. Okay, so the first stage in startup and entrepreneurship, that is pre-incubation, is nothing but machine design procedure actually, if you slightly extend that. Now in this context, I would like to mention one or two statements about projects, final year projects. Okay, it's my observation, and what to say, some feedback about that is that we have very good projects, ideas are very good, but then students come up with some rudimentary fabricated or prototype model of that particular idea towards the end. Okay, and then there is no time for testing that product. Okay, so what happens is that sometimes a very good idea is not presentable because it is not tested properly. So what I suggest to your batch is that by the end of January 2021, you should be ready with your fabrication. So in that way, you should actually plan your project work. Okay, next 1 month, that is February 2021, should be available exclusively for testing and performing experiments on with the help of your product. And then in the month of March, you should be in a position to analyze the results and draw out some useful conclusions and prepare a very nice report. So by end of March, you should be ready with your complete project work. Okay, so that in month of April, in first week, most of the time we have NOx and you are ready with your project completely, and you will be in a position to convince your what to say, the person from industry or examiner who is coming to your stall. You can explain with these results very nicely your idea, and then the people will appreciate that. Okay, anyways, so if you extend this particular procedure of machine design in relation to pre-incubation, and if you add your project in that, then actually you complete the pre-incubation stage itself, and that too as a part of your curriculum. Okay, and if you are passionate enough, you can go for incubation centers. There are so many incubation centers in and around Mumbai city. You can apply there, and you can actually go for incubating your product. Okay, so that is what you can actually seriously consider. Now, why I'm telling this is because if you look at outcome of this particular machine design subject, what happens is that many times students went on to become very good engineering professionals. Many few students actually go away from the engineering itself. That is fine. That is their choice. No doubt about that. But then real purpose of the subject of machine design, or as such engineering, you can say, will be realized, or the real outcome will be seen if the students of mechanical engineering come up with technology based businesses. So that's what is a real outcome, I would say, of this subject. Okay, so with this, I would like to end my introductory part with a quote from Mr. Henry Dreyfus. He is a very expert, eminent personality as far as design is concerned. You can say authority in industrial design. Okay, so he says, if the point of contact between the product and people is a point of friction, then the industrial designer has failed. But on the other hand, if people are made safer, more efficient, more comfortable, or just plain happier by the contact with the product, then the designer has succeeded. Okay, so that is the quote, very nice quote from the Mr. Henry Dreyfus. And now I would like to move on to my presentation. So I'll share my presentation with you now.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, the
Yeah,
video has frozen.
Okay. Okay, let me just see what has happened.
Yes, sir. Right, sir.
Yeah, so okay, thanks for that feedback. Keep on doing this. Whenever there is no, if I'm not audible or in this way, there is no output in the form of video, please let me know about that. That's fine. Okay. So we'll move on to my presentation now. Well, mhm. Okay, that's fine.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
so yeah, so actually I wanted to put this slide also when I was about to speak, when I was making this introduction, but then in due course of I just forgot that. Okay, anyways, that's fine. So we'll move on to next slide. You can see my presentation.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Oh, it is not going. Yes. Okay, so we'll just see what is the scheme for this subject. The course code is MEC 701, subject is machine design 2, and we will have 4 contact hours per week as a theory lecture for this subject. Okay, so then as far as the examination scheme is concerned, we will see as usual we have internal assessment for 20 marks. There will be 2 tests. We will consider average of that, and there is an NSEM examination of 80 marks for 3 hours. Okay, so in all, if you see, there are 100 marks assigned to the theory, and then there is a lab course also, MEL 701, machine design 2, and 2 hours of contact per week is mentioned in the syllabus. And if you look at the term work and practical, we have 25 marks for term work and 25 marks for practical and oral. So as far as practical and oral of this subject is concerned, there will be a design task will be assigned to you, and there will be a sort of 1 hour test for that. And during that design task, you will solve the problem, and on the basis of that task, there will be an oral examination. Okay, so that includes 15 marks for the design task and 10 marks for the oral examination. Like that, it contributes 25. So in all, if you look at this subject, contributes to 150 marks in your total marks. We'll just take an overview of syllabus. We have 6 modules in this. Then first module is design of gears. Then we have rolling contact bearings. We have sliding contact bearings. Design of cams and followers. Fifth module is about design and selection of belts, design of flywheels, and design of and selection of standard roller chains. And last module is about design of clutches and brakes. As far as the references are concerned, we will consider design of machine elements by V.B. Bhandari as our textbook. Okay, most of the content which I am going to deliver here will be from this book. Apart from this, I may rely on sometimes mechanical engineering design by Shigley, sometimes on fairs and sports. And also very important is recommended data book is PSG design data book. And we are going to solve the problems with the help of design data book. And therefore, I strongly recommend that whenever we are going to solve problems, you should be ready with the data book so that you have practice of using the data book. Okay, so it may happen. It's again my another observation is that many times students become sort of lethargic. They say I will use the data book at the time of examination. I know on which page which formula is to be from which page which formula is to be taken. Okay, but then in during examination time there is a tension. You have to recall so many things, and at the time if you are not conversant with the data book, then it unnecessarily kills your time and it will lead to more stressful situation. So therefore I strongly recommend that you should have a habit of using design data book yourself personally. Okay, so that is one of my instruction. We'll quickly go through the objectives and outcomes of this particular subject, machine design 2. So objectives are to acquaint with functional and strength design principles of important machine elements. Second objective is to familiarize selection of standard elements such as rolling element, bearings, belts, etc. And what are the outcomes of this subject? Okay, so now just before I explain about outcomes, I would like to tell you something about Bloom's taxonomy. You might have heard about it. Many people, many of our professors might have told about it, but still I would like to just brush up on that in a quick brush up of that. So Bloom's taxonomy is about teaching and learning process. Okay, so in this case there are three different areas. Number one is cognitive, second one is affective, and third one is psychomotor. Okay, so in cognitive domain, it is about how a teacher designs a particular subject, and at the end of that learning of that particular subject, what students will acquire. Okay, so therefore here I have written here, learner will be able to do what after learning this subject, what you all will be in a position to do. Okay, so that is what is listed here as an outcome. Second domain of Bloom's taxonomy is affective component. So it deals with the attitude of students and their emotional behavior of the students actually. Okay, so in that, do you respond to the requirement of the teacher? Do you follow the instructions? All those things, and what is the attitude towards learning? All those things will be considered in affective component or affective domain of the Bloom's taxonomy. And the last one is psychomotor domain, in which whatever you study in cognitive domain, whatever the way you respond to your learning process, and after that, are you able to manufacture something or put the things in practice? Like for example, typical example of psychomotor domain is like learning to drive, driving a car or bicycle, whatever. Okay, so many times it happens that we know how to drive, but when it comes to actual driving, you may not be able to do that because you need to have a sufficient practice at that. Or like for example, many people nowadays there is no cricket and all those things, but still there are people, they say that particular delivery of that ball should have been treated in that particular way. Okay, but sitting at home and just commenting is one thing, and playing on an actual ground is another thing. Okay, so that is psychomotor. So psychomotor talks about the movement of your body parts and connection of the brain and body parts. Okay, that is psychomotor. Okay, so that's what. So as far as the theory lecture is concerned, we will be typically dealing with cognitive domain, and therefore I have listed here 6 outcomes of this particular subject. So as a learner of this subject, you students will be able to select appropriate gears for power transmission on the basis of given load and speed. You should be able to design gears based on the given conditions. As a learner of this particular subject, you should be in a position to select bearings for given applications from manufacturing catalog. You should be able to select and or design belts and flywheel for given applications. Well, as a learner of this subject, you should be able to design cam and follower mechanisms, and you should be able to design clutches and brakes. Okay, so these are the 6 outcomes of this subject. That's what we have decided. I have taken this from university syllabus. You can refer to the syllabus for this. Well, so at the end of the semester, if all of you are able to do these six tasks, then this overall teaching learning experience will be useful. Otherwise, to somewhere we can consider it is failed, but we will not allow it to fail. We will ensure that all of you should be in a position to do all these tasks, whatever I have listed there. Okay. So moving on to first module, design of gears. And before we actually go into design of gears, we need to understand very important concept of excuse me, mechanical drives. Okay, our mechanical drives are also known as power transmitting mechanisms. So what is a mechanical drive? It is defined as a mechanism which is intended to transmit mechanical power over a certain distance usually involving a change in speed and torque. Okay, so that is power transmitting mechanism. Now, why do we require mechanical drives? So I have listed important 3 reasons here. The first one is that we have prime movers at our disposal. Examples of prime movers are electric motors, engines, IC engines, and turbines. Okay, so all these prime movers run at certain speed and that develop certain maximum torque and power. But the machines connected to these prime movers require a different torque and speed at different for their different operations during their what is a range of operations. Okay, so for example, if you look at this EOT crane, this is a diagram of EOT crane, that is electrically operated overhead traveling crane. Okay, so it is used for moving heavy loads within that particular assembly line or in that workshop from one place to another with another place with the help of this hoisting mechanism, including this crane hook. Now motor runs at say around 960 rpm speed, and this particular rope drum around which this rope moves up and down so that the load is being lowered or raised, that cannot be run at 960 rpm, right? So we need to have some a reduction mechanism called mechanical drive in order to acquire or achieve certain requirements of torque and low speed. Okay, so we reduce the speed of this motor from 960 rpm, and this rope drum will run at around 20 rpm. Okay, so that such a huge reduction is required there. Second reason is that in certain machines variable speeds are required for the operation. Okay, so but at the same time prime mover runs at constant speed. For example, all of you might have operated on the lathe machine, and you know the electric motor will run at certain constant speed, but in order to perform some machining operation, you need to change the speed of this chuck, right? So therefore we require variable speeds here, and there comes in mechanical drive to serve this particular purpose. Next we have, as I mentioned, the prime movers will run at constant uniform rotary motion. Okay, but then there are certain applications like shaper and planer as shown in this figure here, which require linear motions with varying velocities. Okay, so we need to have some mechanism in place to transfer rotary motion into reciprocating motion of this planer or shaper. So these are the reasons why we require mechanical drives. So how do we classify mechanical drives? Now it's 40 minutes past 3 o'clock. Actual time assigned to this particular meeting is 45 minutes. Okay, so I don't know when it will end. I expect that Swati will take the attendance at this moment. And
yes, sir. I saved the file.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so I will continue with my presentation. Okay, I heard that because this is our first meeting, it may extend to 1 hour also. I don't know. People say that way, but then
yes, sir, it will.
Hello, it is like that.
Yes, sir, it will.
Okay.
lectures
Then, but still, I think we will take a break of 15 minutes in between, 10 minutes. Is that fine? Because what will happen, we will go to 1 hour this thing, and then actually I have set another meeting at 4 o'clock. Okay, so we will lose some time on that, and there will be some chaos as such. So just to stick with the current defined meetings, we will stop at first 2 meetings, sir.
unlimited.
Unlimited. Okay, then actually I should not have said the second meeting. So shall I cancel the second meeting and we'll continue with this particular meeting and continue for next 1 hour?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, but you are sure about this, no? That's fine. Okay.
Sir, the message had come.
Acha, I didn't see that. Okay, anyways. Okay, because I'm talking also. So, and I'm taking this lecture for first time on the Zoom. Okay, anyways, that's fine. So, what is this? Darpan has why it is waiting room now?
That is the pre-setting.
Okay, fine. Well, then we'll continue. Let's see. So mechanical drives, we have. Acha, so before I continue, whatever we have discussed till now, the flow, the speed, everything is fine. Okay. So we classify mechanical drives on the basis, principle of operation. So there are two types: the drives that transmit power by means of friction. For example, belt drives, rope drives, and cam and follower mechanism. So I have shown here again belt drives. This is flat belt drive. Here we see a V belt drive. So we are going to design these drives in our this particular subject. Then rope drives, already I talked about this, EOT crane, and we have cam and follower mechanism here. Mechanical drives that transmit power by means of engagement. The examples are chain drives, gear drives, and screw and nut drives. Okay, so these are the examples and classification of the mechanical drives. So how do we select a proper mechanical drive? That is very important task in front of a designer. So there are certain factors, and depending upon these factors, we will consider or select a proper mechanical drive. And these factors are center distance, velocity ratio, shifting arrangements, maintenance considerations, and cost. Okay, so on the basis of these factors, there are certain guidelines in order to select mechanical drives. So if you look at center distance, okay, so we can make use of flat belts and roller chains for longer center distance, long center distances. V belts are used for comparatively short center distances, whereas gear drives have smallest center distance between the two shafts. Okay, now all these characteristics have their own advantages and disadvantages. The second criteria is velocity ratio. There are certain applications where we require a velocity ratio to be constant. Okay, so flat belts and chain drives are not suitable for this, whereas gear drives are preferred in this type of applications where we require constant speed or constant velocity ratio actually. But then there are certain applications where there is a variation in the speed that is required, or there is a slippage. Okay, so in that case actually we can make use of flat belt and V belt for that purpose. Next factor is shifting arrangement. Okay, so there are certain applications wherein we need to change what is the speed ratio or velocity ratio and torque. Like for example, headstock of a lathe or automotive gearbox, and only gear drives are suitable for this type of shifting arrangements. Other mechanical drives are not suitable for shifting arrangement. Then we have maintenance considerations. On the basis of this, belt drives maintenance is quite simple. In case of chain and gear drives, lubrication is an important consideration as far as maintenance is concerned. And last factor is cost. So flat belts are cheapest, V belt and chain drives are comparatively costly, but gear drives are costliest. Okay, so these are certain guidelines on the basis of which we can think about a given application and what are the requirement, what should be the outcome of that particular application, and then we will select what is the mechanical drive for that application. And here in this table I have listed what is the maximum power transmitting capacity of different drives. Okay, so belt drives are used for low to high power transmission. So in case of V belts, we can go up to 750 kilowatts. In case of flat belts, it can be used up to 2000 kilowatt. Chain drives are again used for low to high application, wherein chain drives can be used up to 4000 kilowatt. Gear drives can be are used for low to very high power transmitting applications, so up to 40,000 kilowatt or even more than that. Whereas screw and nut and cam and follower drives are used for specific applications, and that too with low power transmitting capacity. So let us consider one exercise here. So just think about for maybe 1 or 2 minutes, and can you recommend a drive about by considering all these guidelines? for the situation wherein prime mover is induction motor with specifications as 11 kilowatt and 960 rpm, and this particular motor is used to run a press, maybe punching press or press brake, and speed is 60 rpm. Okay, so can you think of some solution to this? Actually, if we had been in a class, we could have done this exercise very nicely. But then I think I will continue with this. I will just explain how do we come up with a required solution for this. Okay, so initially we'll now it is only mentioned that you have a prime mover, and this prime mover is being used for press brake application, and the speed ratio is known. So input speed is 960 rpm, output speed is 60 rpm. So we can find out overall gear, not gear ratio, overall transmission ratio. Okay, so what I mean by overall transmission ratio or velocity ratio, to be specific, is that this 960 upon 60 that comes out to be 16. Yes. Okay. So 16 as to 1 is the required gear ratio, required velocity ratio. So what we'll consider, we have so many mechanical drives at our disposal: belt, chain, gear, screw nut, and cam and follower. So we will assume that this is not applicable, cam and screw and nut and cam and follower. That is our assumption. We assume that it is not possible to make use of these in this particular application. Then we further make assumptions that the shafts are parallel. Okay, all the shafts involved are parallel. That is our assumption, because therein we can actually move out the drives like worm and worm wheel or bevel gears, which are used in case of intersecting and non-parallel axis, or shafts that are intersecting or non-parallel. Okay, so that is our another assumption. Then we have three options. We can have belt drives, we can have chain drives, we can have gear drives. But then another important guideline in case of selection of mechanical drives is that we need to look at the overall transmission ratio. So overall transmission ratio is 16. Okay, and this is very high. This generally it is mentioned that for a particular stage of power transmission, the velocity ratio should not be more than 6. If you increase velocity ratio beyond that, the size of elements involved in power transmission increases, and therefore cost of material increases, and at the same time it becomes bulky. So therefore the general practical guideline for selection of a power transmitting mechanism for a stage is it should not be more than 6. Now we have a gear ratio of 16. Okay, so what we do, we will consider first of all square root of 16, that must be less than 6. So we can consider two-stage power transmitting mechanism. Okay, so now there are we know we are going to make use of two-stage power transmitting mechanism, but that in that again we can have only gearbox gear drives, or belt and chain drives, or combination of these. Okay, so if you make further assumptions that there will be slight variation in the speed at the prime mover side because of this coupling and because of misalignments on the shaft, we will make use of the belts here, and we'll specifically say that V belt is selected for this, and that is again another assumption. Okay, but then if you make use of V belt or flat belt after this in the second stage also, and it is connected to the shaft of the press, which is having very high shock. Okay, so in this application it's not advisable to consider the belt drives. So therefore we go for gear drives, and obviously first choice will be spur gears because it is simplest compared to other gear drives. So therefore in this way we come up with a suitable mechanism, or we recommend on the basis of our own assumptions, our own understanding, our own experience and intuition. We come up with this as a solution for this particular application, wherein power is transmitted from electric motor to press brake. Okay, so this is one of the solution. Like this you can think of as you keep on changing your assumptions, there will be different solutions. Okay, so all these solutions may be valid, that you have to take a call on that, and we have to justify your selections. Okay, so this is one of the solution for that. Now we'll move on to next slide. So we now specifically go to gear drives, because we are discussing about design of gears. So obviously we consider gear drives, and gear drives consist of gears. With the elements of gear drives are gears, shafts, bearings, and some seals and housing of that particular drive. Okay, so basic and very important element of this drive is gears. Excuse me. Okay, so gears, how do we define gears? You have already gone through this definition in, I think, kinematics of machinery, maybe in 4th semester. But just for, again, for the purpose of revision, we will discuss about gears and advantages and disadvantages of gear drives. So gears are defined as toothed wheels or multi-lobed cams, which transmit power and motion from one shaft to another by means of successive engagement of teeth. This is very important. Okay, so it's a positive drive because of this successive engagement of teeth. Okay, so well, what are the advantages of gear drives when we compare it to belt and chain drives? Okay, so as I mentioned, it is a positive drive and the velocity ratio remains constant, because the center to center distance is very small or comparatively small. In case of gear drives, the overall arrangement results in a compact construction. Gear drives can transmit very large power, which is beyond the range of belt or chain drives. It can transmit motion at a very slow velocity, which is not possible with belt drives. It has very high efficiency. In case of spur gears, it is as high as around 99%. Okay, so very high efficiency. And it is suitable for changing the velocity ratio over a wide range by selecting or by utilizing a suitable shifting mechanism. Okay, so these are the advantages of gear drives or belt and chain drive. Now we'll see what are the disadvantages. So gear drives are costly. Their maintenance requirement is very high. The manufacturing processes for the gears are complicated and highly specialized. They require careful attention for lubrication and cleanliness, and also it is required to have precise alignment of the shafts. Okay, so these are the disadvantages. There may be a 5 marks question in the first compulsory question about explain advantages and disadvantages of gear drives. Excuse me. Well, so we'll move on to the next slide, that is classification of gears. Okay, so in all, basically there are 4 types of gears: spur gears, helical gears, bevel gears, and worm gears. Okay, so we'll discuss one by one. So in case of spur gears, the gear teeth are cut parallel to the axis of shaft, and therefore spur gears are suitable for parallel shafts. So here these two this figure shows the spur gears in side view, front view and side view. Okay, so we see here the pinion is rotating anti-clockwise, whereas the clockwise rotation is for the gear, and this is because of direct engagement of the teeth at this particular point of contact. Okay, so as I mentioned, they are suitable for parallel arrangement, and if you resolve the forces which are coming on a particular teeth in mesh, we see there is a resultant force along the line of action, and we can resolve these forces along the tangent and radial directions. Okay, so the tangential component is useful for transmitting torque from driving pinion to the driven gear, whereas the radial component will induce compressive forces on the shafts of the pinion and gear. Now we'll discuss about the helical gears. In helical gears, the teeth are cut at an inclination to the shaft axis, and that angle is known as helix angle. Okay, so again, helical gears can be used for parallel shafts or shafts at cross or cross shafts, you can say. But our attention will be concentrated on the parallel shafts in this case. Now, in helical gear, when you resolve the resultant force between the contacting or the teeth which are in mesh, then we have, along with tangential and radial component, we have thrust component also. Thrust is along the axis of shaft. So because of its inclination, we see one more component which comes along the axis of the shaft. Okay, so that is one of the, that is the disadvantage as far as helical gears is concerned when compared to spur gear. But at the same time, if you look at the engagement of teeth at the time of developing contact, there is a direct line contact, because if you see here, the teeth are cut parallel, and there is a impact when two teeth come in contact at the start of the contact, and there is a line contact, so it will make noise for high speed operations. Whereas in case of helical gears, the contact is developed along the line of the teeth. Like for example, at the leading edge, there is a point contact and it keeps on moving along the teeth length or the face width of the teeth, tooth, you can say. Okay, so in case of helical gears, we have right-handed helical teeth and left-handed helical teeth, which can be in contact, okay, or which can be in mesh. As I mentioned here, there is a point contact and it keeps on gradually developing along the length of face width of the gear tooth. These helical gears are suitable for high-speed operation. When we look at the bevel gears, we have they are suitable for transmitting power at an angle which is 90 degrees. Okay, so when shafts are not intersecting and they are at 90-degree angle, then we can make use of the bevel gears for that application. So typical example of bevel gear application is in differential. Okay, so in differential, I'm giving that example because many of you might be aware about what is the differential of a vehicle. Okay, so the power from propeller shaft is transmitted through the pinion which is connected to the end of propeller shaft 2. So you can consider here, for example, this is the end of propeller shaft, and it is rotating in clockwise direction when you see from the left side. And there is a pinion attached to the end of the propeller shaft, and that pinion, bevel pinion, is in contact with the bevel wheel. Okay, and so this wheel is mounted on the vehicle rear axle. Okay, so there is a transfer of power at 90 degrees. So this is coming horizontal, and then in the plane of slide, okay, there will be axle of the vehicle. So there is a power transmission at 90 degrees. In case of worm and worm wheel, if the shafts are not intersecting and non-parallel, in that case we can make use of the worm and worm wheel. Typical application of worm and worm wheel is in material handling equipments. Okay, so as I mentioned at the some of the guidelines for mechanical drives, generally helical gears and spur gears are used for a speed ratio of less than 6 or 6:1, where bevel gears are used for speed ratio of 1:1, but in case of vehicle application where we call it as permanent reduction, it can be increased to 3:1. But in case of worm and worm gears, we can have very high speed ratio, more than 15 or 16, and generally it can go to, normally it is 60:1, 60, and can go to 100:1. Okay, so that is specialty of the worm and worm gears. Now we will actually start a proper design a problem. So I want all of you to write this statement of problem in your notebook. So design a two-stage gearbox to transmit 10 kilowatt power from an electric motor running at 1440 RPM to a machine with approximate overall reduction ratio 10:1. So are you writing? I want all of you to write this statement because we are solving this problem. This type of problem can be asked for 20 marks.
Yes, sir, writing.
Okay, so if you are done, you let me know. We'll go ahead then. So you are done?
Yes, sir, done.
Well, very good. I hope, and as I mentioned, I want that all of you should write this because this is a problem, typical problem which we are going to solve, which will consist of design of spur and helical gears. Okay. So moving on to next slide. Now, very first step in the selection of gear drives is selection of what is the type of gear. Okay, so we have just now discussed about different types of gears: spur, helical, bevel, and worm wheel. Okay, so out of these, for a given suitable or given application, which gear type is suitable? How do we decide upon that? Okay, so this is the first step in selection. Now, what are the factors which are dictating this selection of types of gears? So, general layout of shafts, speed reduction, power to be transmitted, input speed, and cost. Okay, so on the basis of general layout of shafts, I have also covered in the previous slide about this. So if the shafts are parallel, we will make use of spur and helical gears. If shafts are intersecting at right angles, we will make use of bevel gears. Whereas if shafts axes are perpendicular and non-intersecting, we will make use of worm gears. So this is on the basis of general layout of shaft. We will now consider speed reduction. So again, I have mentioned about this, but just again we will repeat it. The speed reduction or velocity ratio for a single pair of spur or helical gear is normally 6:1. And again, I also mentioned about this particular statement. With increasing velocity ratio, the size of the gear will increases, and this results in increase in size of the gearbox, and at the same time, material cost will increase. Therefore, it is limited to 6:1. Now, for high speed reduction, what we'll do, we'll go for 2-stage or 3-stage constructions. So we will divide the gear pairs into number of stages depending upon what is the requirement. Now, normal velocity ratio for pair of bevel gears, as I mentioned in the previous slide, is 1:1, and it can be increased to 3:1 under certain circumstances. Okay, for high speed reduction, as I mentioned on the previous slide, for worm gears, it is 60:1, which can be increased to 100:1, and they are typically used in material handling equipments. Okay, so now again, I think I have mentioned about this particular para also. Well, one more comment I would like to make about my PPT is that if you see, I have put the paragraphs, statements, sentences as it is on the most of the slides. Okay, it's not just bullet points. The reason behind this is that when you are referring my PPT, it should be a standalone document. Okay, so once you go through this PPT, typically barring 1 or 2 slides, you should not be in a you need not run around to which book to refer, where to refer what material. Okay, so that is my effort to prepare the PPTs in such a way that it becomes a standalone document, so you can rely on these PPTs for your exam preparation also. Okay, so just we will go through these two paragraphs. Hello.
So will this PPT be on the Moodle?
Yeah, I'll put it on Moodle. There is no difficulty. But actually, if you look at Moodle, okay, already Professor Johnson has put so much material on that. Okay, it's like very much crowded. And in that also, if I put my PPT, that will be just okay, additional. It will be more crowded. So what I will do is that I will, as I mentioned, I will put this PPT on my YouTube account and I will share the YouTube links over there. Okay, so rather than
Okay,
what will happen, I will have to upload twice then. Okay, anyways, I will be uploading on the YouTube account, right? So I will share the links for that on the Moodle, or it can be done there is, but if it is to be done on Moodle, as I mentioned, it is very crowded first of all, and then I will have to upload twice. Okay, so so it will be available to you. There is no difficulty, or else I can send it through Google Drive, depending upon its size. I'll see what is the size. If it is going through email, I can send it to one of you, and you can share on the WhatsApp or whatever, because I'm not on WhatsApp, right? Uh, and that also can be done. There is no difficulty. Okay, so I'll share this PPT with you. There is no difficulty. Okay, so I'll just go through these two statements, even though it may be repetition. Okay, so spur gears generate noise in high-speed applications due to sudden contact over the entire face width between two meshing teeth. In helical gears, the contact between the two meshing teeth begins with a point and gradually extends along the tooth, resulting in quiet operations. Helical gears, therefore, are preferred for high-speed power transmission. And the last factor which dictates the selection of type of gears is the cost. So from cost considerations, spur gears are the cheapest. They are not only easy to manufacture, but there are a number of methods of manufacturing. Okay, so when compared to, this is in comparison to helical, bevel and worm gear. So there are many manufacturing processes or methods are available for manufacture of spur gears. At the same time, the manufacturing of helical, bevel and worm gears is a specialized and costly affair, okay, or costly operation. Well, now we have started a problem wherein I have given a statement of problem. So the first step, as I mentioned, first step in the selection of solving that problem is selection of type of gears. So the problem statement says that we need to design a two-stage gearbox, right? And what is the motor? Okay, to transmit 10 kilowatt power from an electric motor running at this speed, 1440, and overall gear, reduction ratio is given as 10:1. Okay, so this is more than 6. So automatically we are going to consider two-stage gearbox, and they have also mentioned here. So sometimes they may not mention two-stage gearbox, so they'll simply say design a gearbox. So again, you'll have to talk about whether it is two-stage, three-stage, or single-stage. Okay, so or if they just mention design a power transmitting mechanism to transmit this, then you'll have to perform the exercise what we did in the previous example. I mentioned about that recommend a particular mechanical drive for transmitting power from electric motor to press brake. Okay, so depending upon what is the statement of problem, we'll have to start, and at this particular problem statement we will start at selection of the type of gear, right? Or so I have already discussed about selection of how do we select types of gears. So now we'll actually select. So I expect all of you to write this as step number 1 in your solution, selection of type of gears. Okay, you write this particular as it is, and wherever I have mentioned about this step 1 in green color, that is a typical procedure you need to follow in your problem solution. Okay, so if you collect these particular slides, that becomes a solution for given problem. Right.
So
So what is that? Hello.
will you give us this?
Yeah, I told you, no, I will share this PPT by way of YouTube and by way of emailing, or emailing one of you, and that one person will share with the whole class through WhatsApp. Okay. So it will be available to you. There is no difficulty. Okay, so there is again some difficulty with my video. Okay, let me just see what has happened. I'm not sure what has happened here. Just stop and start it. I think, hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
You're able to hear me? Okay,
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Acha, I thought we have came out of the meeting. Anyways, there is some difficulty with my this thing video. I'll just try one more time. Otherwise, I will just share the PPT itself. Okay, and I will talk. Okay, I think it is connected now. Just give a minute to me.
Air is black.
Okay, so there is some difficulty with the Wi-Fi. Okay, that is there. Why it is not connecting? Okay, yes. Well, it appears that there is some difficulty with this app. Just a minute. No, it's 190. Okay. Give me a moment. Okay, so it's there. Okay, so just let me adjust it. Well, okay, so hmm. So I'm going to the PPT now. Okay. Well, so am I connected now? Yes, I think I should be. Okay, it should be there. Okay, so I was discussing about how do we select. Are you able to listen me now? Are you able to listen me? Hello, anybody?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's fine. Well, so again, when we are going to select type of gear, as I mentioned while selecting the mechanical drive in general, we need to make some assumptions here because we have been given only power and some speed ratio, and we have not. It's not clearly mentioned which machine it is to be connected. Okay, so we need to make some assumptions. So again, we will assume that there are only parallel shafts are available in this mechanism, so it helps us to select only spur and helical gears, because our attention is concentrated right now on the spur and helical gears. Okay, so the speed reduction ratio or velocity ratio for a single stage is less than 6. So, and the mentioned ratio in the statement of problem is 10:1. So obviously square root of 10 is less than 6. Therefore, we will select two-stage gearbox. Also, we will assume that the pitch line velocity is less. Okay, so generally pitch line velocity ranges maybe 10 meter per second, 20 meter per second. Okay, so here we'll assume that it is less. Now I'm not mentioning any number for that. Okay, so that helps us to decide upon spur and helical gears. As now the second pair of gears is connected to the load or machine, and we don't know what machine. It is expected that two loadings on the second pair is higher than the first pair. Okay, so that is our expectation, and that's what we assume. And with these particular assumptions, now we say that there are we are already, it is mentioned in the statement of problem that two-stage gearbox is required. Okay, so we are going to have two stages in the gearbox, and then we will select for one stage a spur gear arrangement, and for second stage we will select helical gear. Now which should be connected to the prime mover, and which pair of gears should be connected to the machine. Okay, so as mentioned in the last assumption, the tooth loadings will be higher in the second pair. We will consider helical gear pair as the pair of gears which is connected to the machine or load. Okay, so therefore you just write down these assumptions, note down this assumption in a hurry, scribble down this, and this is our selection. We will select a pair of spur gears for first stage reduction and helical gears for the second stage reduction. So write down this actually. Okay, so I will just show you a diagram also here. So like this it would be. Okay, you can just draw a rough sketch of this diagram. Why I'm insisting on writing in your notebook is that you will have in your notebook a proper solution for this problem. So you need not depend on collection of the different slides then. Okay, so hope you have written this particular answer for the first step. You just write down first step, selection of types of gears, scribble down assumptions, and this write as it is. Select a pair of spur gears for first stage reduction and helical gears for the second stage reduction. Now you can do it other way around also. Okay, with the assumption that because in first stage it is connected to the prime mover, so their speeds involved are high, right? So in that case we can say, on that ground we say helical gears are suitable for first stage reduction. Okay, that is also possible. But then just to what to say, build down the problem, because we have a proper well defined derivation or well derived derivation for design of the spur gears, and on that we build down and we consider the design of this helical gears. So that is another convenience. Therefore I am considering again here spur gear as the first stage reduction, but that is just a part of convenience. Okay, so it is not a criteria to select type of gear in the problem or in that particular application. Okay, so when we have selected a type of gear and two-stage gears, first stage as spur gears, second stage as helical gears, we need to go again through some of the basics related to spur gears. Okay, and I think this will be some portion will be repeated. You might have gone through this completely. You might have derived these things, but again, it's better to revise here. Okay, so so we'll discuss about law of gearing. Okay, so you have gone through this, I know it. So fundamental law of gearing, what it says: the common normal to the tooth profile at the point of contact should always pass through a fixed point called pitch point in order to obtain a constant velocity ratio. Now what is meaning of this? Okay, so for that purpose we'll consider a gear pair of gears or pair of gear tooth, okay, here in contact. Okay, so there is a contact point is C at this point here, and what the law of gearing says, common normal to the tooth profile at point of contact. So this is point of contact and this is gear tooth profile. Okay, this is gear tooth profile for the gear on the gear number 1. Okay, so we draw common normal to this profile, so that is NN. Okay, now this common normal should always pass through a fixed point, that is fixed point P here, called pitch point. Okay, now this pitch point is on the pitch circle diameters of the mating gears. Okay, now if you draw a common tangent through that pitch point, okay, so this is horizontal line, the angle made by this common tangent to the common normal of the involute profiles of the teeth in mesh is called as pressure angle. Okay, and in order to obtain a constant velocity ratio, this is the requirement of the meshing gears, and it is called fundamental law of gearing. Once again, I'll repeat: common normal to the tooth profile, that is NN, at point of contact at point C, should always pass through a fixed point called pitch point, that is point P. Once again, I mentioned that this point P is on the pitch circle diameters of gear 1 and 2. Okay, so this is the requirement in order to have a constant velocity ratio. Now, how do we prove that? So for this purpose, let's consider O1 and O2 as the centers of these two mating gears. C is the point of contact, as I mentioned. NN is the common normal, and if you look at this particular line CA, this particular line CA indicates a vector, or you can say velocity vector, when you consider point C on gear 1. Okay, because this CA is perpendicular to the line joining point C and point O1, right? So it represents a velocity vector when point C is considered on tooth of gear number 1. At the same time, the vector CB represents the velocity vector when you consider point C is on gear. Point C is on. Actually, there is some problem with the video. It appears. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll continue then as it is. Well, so CB is a velocity vector when you consider point C on gear 2. Okay, and it is perpendicular to line O2C. Okay, so I'll move on to second slide now. Next slide. Okay, so again from this figure we see here that CA is perpendicular to O1C, as I mentioned, and CB is perpendicular to O2C. Now this is a very important statement. The projections of two vectors CA and CB, that is this projection of CA and CB onto the common normal, that is NN. So if you project this here like this, that is represented by line CD. Okay, so this must be equal. These projections of CB and CA on this line NN should be equal. It is the required condition. Why it is required? If it is not the case, then teeth will not remain in contact and there will be slip. Okay, so we may ensure that here. Now, if you look at this diagram, and we can represent velocity vector CA, which is a tangential velocity when you consider the pitch circle diameter of O1. Okay, so that is represented as V is equal to R omega. So what is V? CA, that is CA is the velocity. Omega 1 is the angular speed at which gear O1 is rotating about its center, and O1C is the radius. Okay, so R omega. So CA is equal to omega into O1C. CB is equal to similarly to that omega 2 into O2C. And if you take ratio of these two, we get omega 1 and upon omega 2 as this particular expression. Now, if you look at, let me see here. Wait a minute. Just a minute. Excuse me. Well, that's fine. Well, we'll go ahead with this. There is no video. I was trying to see whether it is possible to connect through Zoom video. Okay, anyways. So we have arrived at this particular expression, omega 1 upon omega 2 is equal to this. Okay, on the basis of this particular diagram. Okay, now we will look at two triangles, two similar triangles. O1CG, that is O1CG, this particular triangle here. Okay, this is a similar triangle with triangle CAD, this one. So from these similar triangles, we can write the ratios O1C upon CA is equal to O1G upon CD. Also, we have similar triangles O2FC, O2FC, and triangle triangle CDB. These are also similar triangles. So from these two triangles, O2FC and CDB, again we can write a ratio of sides of the triangles as O2C upon CB is equal to O2F upon CD. So from these equations B and C, we can arrive at the ratio CA upon CB as this. Okay, and if you consider equation number 1 A and D, you see here it is O2 upon O2C upon O1C, and here we see it is O1C is in numerator whereas O2C is in denominator, so they will cancel out with each other, and what remains is that the ratio omega 1 upon omega 2 is equal to O2F upon O1G. Now still if you look at O2F, it is here O2F and O1G. So we are not able to make any sense out of this. Okay, so we need to again consider other similar triangles, and we want to convert the ratio omega 1 upon omega 2 in terms of radii of these gears. Okay, so for that purpose we will consider here. I'm hearing some chit chat is going on. Can you please stop that? Okay, or else I'll have to mute all of you then. Acha, yeah, tell me, Sushant. I will have to unmute you.
Sorry, sir, mistakenly happened.
Acha, by mistake you raised your hand. Sushant Gunjal
Yes,
is also
sir.
raising. Acha, you are asking some questions. Any doubt?
No, sir.
Then why are you raising your hand?
Sir, by mistake it happened.
Acha. Okay, that's fine. Anyways, okay, so again I was mentioning that we need to express omega 1 upon omega 2 in terms of radii of the gears. Okay, so that is distance O1P, because O1P is pitch circle radius for gear 1, and O2P is the pitch circle radius for the gear 2. Okay, so we want to express these ratios of angular velocity in terms of these radii. So therefore we will consider again the similar triangles O2FP, this triangle O2FP, and the triangle O1GP. Okay, these two triangles. From that we can write the ratio O2F upon O1G as O2P upon O1P, and therefore we can say from these two expressions E and F, we can write omega 1 upon omega 2 as O2P upon O1P, which is nothing but a ratio of radii of the gears, and that is constant. Okay, so because this ratio on the right hand side, as mentioned or as presented in this expression G, is constant, we can say the ratio of angular velocities for the gears in mesh is also constant. Okay, so why I consider derivation of this particular law of gearing is that sometimes it is asked for 8 marks or sometimes it is asked in that 5-mark question. So explain the law of gearing and derive, prove that ratio of angular velocities is constant. Okay, so therefore I revised it. Now, if you look at this law of gearing, and we know there are two types of profiles or curves are available as far as the what do you say, profile of the gear tooth is concerned. Okay, one is involute and another one is cycloidal profile or cycloidal curve, and both of these curves satisfy this fundamental law of gearing. Okay, but in case of involute profile, pressure angle remains constant, whereas in case of cycloidal profile, it varies, and therefore for gear, all the gear applications, we will consider involute curves for tooth profile. Again, some repetition, terminology of spur gears. Okay, so again here I have shown this particular spur gear, and one particular tooth is enlarged here. Okay, so this nomenclature which is shown on this slide is taken from BIS, that Bureau of Indian Standards. They have recommended it. Okay, so that's why we are calling like this particular length from here to here as face width. Okay, it is mentioned in that BIS. This is top land. Okay, the face, addendum, dedendum. Now I will just revise these definitions. First of all, we'll start with the circular pitch. Okay, so circular pitch is the distance between two adjacent or two similar points on the adjacent teeth of a gear. Okay, so what is that distance? It is along the circumference. Okay, so circumference is pi. If you assume d prime as the diameter of this particular gear, and that is pitch circle diameter. So this is the pitch circle here. You can see here this particular center line circle indicates pitch circle. Okay, and we are assuming d prime as the diameter of that pitch circle, and circumference is pi d prime. Therefore, we can write circular pitch as pi d prime upon number of teeth. Okay, so this is circular pitch. There is again something called as diametral pitch. It is defined as number of teeth upon diameter of that particular gear. So z upon d prime. Another very important term in relation to the gears is module, and it is defined as inverse of the diametral pitch. So module is defined as ratio of diameter of the pitch circle diameter to number of teeth. Well, so we will just go through these definitions of addendum circle, or before that we'll see what is addendum. Addendum is the radial distance between the pitch circle point on pitch circle to the tip of the tooth, that is addendum. Dedendum is the radial distance between point on the pitch circle to the root of the tooth. Okay, so dedendum circle will pass through the root of the tooth, whereas addendum circle will pass through the tip of the tooth. Base circle is the circle through which the involute profile will start. So if you see the this particular, I will just consider this tooth here. Okay, so if you consider this is the base circle, so the profile of the tooth from here towards the tip is involute. But if you look at the profile of the tooth from base circle to the root of the tooth, it is straight line. Okay, so base circle is the circle where the involute profile of the tooth starts. Then we'll just brush upon what is face and flank of the gear tooth. Face is the portion or surface of the gear tooth from addendum, pitch circle to the addendum along the face width. Similarly, flank is the surface of the gear tooth from pitch circle to the dedendum along the face width. Okay, so these are the basics or nomenclature of the gear, or you can say terminology of the spur gears. Okay. Now another important term is in relation to spur gears is, or as such in all gears, it is center to center distance. Okay. Now how will, if you consider this particular diagram here, from center of this pinion to center of this gear is called center to center distance, and it is half of the diameters, pitch circle diameters. So dp prime is the pitch circle diameter of the pinion, whereas dg prime is the pitch circle diameter of the gear, and half of that will give you the center to center distance. And we know dp prime and dg prime in terms of module and number of teeth, mzp plus mzg, and we can write the center to center distance in terms of module and number of teeth on the gear and pinion as shown here. Again, gear ratio is defined as speed of the input shaft to the speed of the output shaft. Okay, so np upon ng, with the assumption that pinion is driver and gear is the driven. And for gear trains, you might have studied in kinematics of machinery that gear. Yes, Justin, can you say something? You want to ask question? Well, anyways, I think I need to tolerate this disturbance. Well, that's fine. Okay, Justin, still your hand is raised. You want to ask something? I need to unmute you.
No, sir, I clicked it by mistake.
Yeah, I understand that. So many mistakes will happen. You know, that will be like contagious, no? Many people will commit mistakes of raising hands. Okay, that's fine. Well, okay, so you might have studied in your kinematics of machinery subject. For a gear train, there is a relation between speed and number of teeth. So n1 t1 is equal to n2 t2. Okay, so here we are considering n for the speed, and instead of t, we are considering z as the nomenclature for number of teeth. So np zp is equal to ng zg. So from that we can write gear ratio as, and I once again define what is gear ratio. It is speed of the input shaft or driving member to the speed of the output shaft or driven member. Okay, therefore in terms of number of teeth it will be other way around. It is zg upon zp. Well, that is about the basics of gear truth. Okay, so any difficulty, any doubts till now?
Sir, I had a question.
Yeah, who is this?
Sir, I'm Siddharth Shetty.
Yeah, please tell me.
Yeah, sir, so can you just go to the previous slide?
Yep. This one or
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, this one. Okay, so sir, the circular pitch, as you told, is along the circumference. Okay, so then what about the diametral pitch? I mean,
okay,
about
so,
the diametral pitch.
Yeah. So diametral pitch is actually a concept which is it's very convenient to consider the diameter into picture in the analysis. Okay, so we know what is the diameter of that particular gear blank or particular gear, right? So we define diametral pitch as a ratio of number of teeth on that particular gear to the diameter of that pitch circle diameter. Okay, so it's defined that way for our convenience.
Okay.
Right. Well, we'll discuss about the standard systems of gear tooth. Okay, so as I mentioned, there are two profiles, involute and cycloidal. But then all standard systems prescribe the involute profile for the gear tooth because of the reasons which I have mentioned on this slide. So I'll just go through one by one. The involute profile satisfies the fundamental law of gearing at any center distance. Okay, that is advantage of involute profile. All involute gears of given module and pressure angle are completely interchangeable. This is very important. They are interchangeable and suitable for mass production. All involute gears of a given module and pressure angle can be machined from one single tool. This is again from same consideration, mass produced, and one single tool is required for manufacturing both gear and pinion or mating gears as such. The basic rack of an involute profile has straight sides. Okay, so what is the benefit of this? Now, before I discuss about that, if you increase the radius of particular gear and keep on increasing the radius, it is observed that the involute profile or involute curve becomes straighter and straighter. Okay, so as you go towards infinity, if you assume that the diameter of that gear is infinite, so in that case, involute profile will become a proper straight line. Okay, so that's what meaning of this basic rack. I will show on the next slide what is this basic rack. Okay, and it's comparatively easy to machine straight sides, and generally these basic racks are used for manufacturing of the involute gears. Okay, so cutting of accurate gears becomes easier when you have straight basic racks as tools. Okay, next and last point is the slight change in the center distance will not affect the, or it will not have effect on shape of the involute. Okay, and in addition to that, pitch point will remain fixed and law of gearing will be satisfied. Therefore, velocity ratio remains constant in case of involute profile. So it can adjust to slight change in the center distance also. These are the benefits of involute profile over the cycloidal profile. Okay, so therefore all standard systems of gear tooth prefer or recommend involute profile for the tooth profile. Okay, and we have 3 standard systems: 14.5 degree full depth involute system, 20 degree full depth involute system, and 20 degree stub involute system. Okay, so we'll just go through these particular systems quickly. So the basic rack, what I was mentioning on the previous slide, is shown here. Okay, these are the 3 different basic racks for 3 different systems or standard systems for gear tooth. Okay, so in case of 14.5 full depth involute system, minimum number of teeth on the pinion to avoid interference is 23. Okay, and major advantage of that is quieter operation. However, 20 degree full depth involute has certain number of advantages over that. So we generally recommended system is 20 degree full depth involute system. Nowadays, actually people go for 20 degree stub tooth involute system, but as per the requirement of the syllabus, we will consider 20 degree full depth involute system. So in this particular system, minimum number of teeth on the pinion to avoid interference is 17. And it is also recommended by Bureau of Indian Standards and widely used in practice. So what are the advantages of this particular system over 14.5 degree pressure angle system? It reduces risk of undercutting and interference due to increased pressure angle. Increase in the sense it is increased from 14.5 to 20. The tooth becomes slightly broader at the root. Okay, and this makes tooth stronger and increases the load carrying capacity. So this is an important benefit of going for 20 degree full depth involute system. It has greater length of contact. This is another important benefit over the 14.5 degree of pressure angle system. Okay, then compared to 20 degree full depth involute and 20 degree stub tooth involute system, this particular system has various good advantages. Like it saves a lot of material because it's stub tooth. So if you see this particular diagram, and in this diagram, from pitch circle line till the tip of the tooth, this particular dimension is m. M is module. It is equivalent to m or equal to m. Okay. Whereas in case of stub tooth, it is 0.8 times m. So there is a material saving in this case. Okay. Again, in lower side also, dedendum side also, you can see it is 1.25 m, and here it is equal to m. Okay. So there are advantages of 20 degree stub tooth profile. However, we will make use of 20 degree full depth involute system because it is recommended by BIS, and it is the way we are going to deal with in machine design subject here. Well, module and size of the gear tooth. Okay, so module has very prominent effect on size of the gear tooth. Okay, because the way we define module is it is number of pitch circle diameter to number of teeth on that. Okay, so as the size of module increases, as the module increases, the size of gear tooth increases, and hence module is considered as the index of size of the gear tooth. Okay, so you can see here in this diagram, with changing module, the size of gear tooth is increasing. So for module 2, this is the size of the gear teeth, whereas for module 5, this is the size of the comparative size of the comparative difference in the sizes you can see here. Okay, so it is indicator of size of gear tooth. Now, as I mentioned, we are going to consider 20-degree full depth system. These are the standard proportions for addendum, dedendum, and all this. These are available in the PhD design data book on page number 8.2. Okay, and this basic rag for 20-degree full involute tooth profile is also taken from PhD design data book, page number 8.2. So you can have these particular diagrams there. You can now, as far as the module is concerned, we need to select module initially, or we need to calculate the module on the basis of strength, beam strength criteria, and then we need to select the preferred modules from this table, which is on page number 8.2 in PhD design data book, table number 1. Okay, so as far as possible, we will select the module size or module from the column number 1, which is as close as possible. Suppose, for example, according to calculation, module comes out to be say 2.8. Then we'll consider 3 as the module for that. Okay. Very rarely we will go for this choice number 2, and it's preferably it's better to avoid the choice of under column 3. Okay. So typically we will end up only selecting module from the column number 1. So remember this. We will do this from page number 8.2 from PhD design data book. On this diagram, just for the way it should be drawn, the gear pair of gears in mesh, I have just mentioned about conventional representation. Okay, so here this figure shows the conventional representation, and in this we have shown the 2 circles to represent a gear. Okay, so center line circle, which is shown here, represent the pitch circle diameter of that particular gear, and the solid line circle shows the addendum circle for both the gears. Then we can show the shafts and center lines as shown here, and in this front view you can just show the center lines of the axis of the shaft and center lines for this particular line as the pitch circle diameter line for pinion and for gear. Okay, so this is the conventional representation. When you are going to when you are going to going for drawings, you will follow this particular representation. Well, it's almost 10 minutes to 5, and I think if I start this particular force analysis, we will not be in a position to complete that. Okay, but if it is allowed, can we extend till 5:15? But you have lecture after this?
Yes, sir. We have a lecture.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I think then it's better to stop here.
Yes, sir.
Because it is 10 minutes to 5, but then we will not be in a position to complete this particular portion, right? Or particular slide actually. So we'll continue tomorrow after this.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for attentive listening.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So, yeah, Swati, are you there? Swati is there?
Yes, sir. I saved the attendance.
Yeah, so you please mail it to me. How will you mail to me?
Okay, sir. So I have your email ID on my project guide.
You have my email ID? That's fine. That's
Yes,
good.
sir. Yes.
Okay, so then email to me today itself. Okay, so thank you very
Yes,
much.
sir, I'll send it
I am now going to end the meeting now. Okay, so see you tomorrow at the same time.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.